I think the first two steps are, what's the change we're trying to make and who are we trying to change?
Sure.
Who's it for and what's it for?
Sure.
Okay. So what Starbucks has found every single time Howard Schultz has tried something else, he keeps coming back to two things. One, don't make lousy coffee. Every time the coffee quality goes down, they realize they have to recalibrate and make it go back up. It doesn't mean they have to make the best coffee, but they bought not Slayer. They bought that other company that made a really expensive coffee machine. I can't remember what it was. They tried to get into instant coffee, each time trying to raise the standard of coffee. And the second thing they try to do is build the third place. Free Wi-Fi, comfortable place to sit, clean bathroom. No one's going to ask you to leave. It's like a pub, except they don't serve beer, right? Those are the two things that are at the heart of their story. Blank Street, and I'll confess, I don't drink coffee and I haven't been to a Blank Street, but I've walked past it many times. Blank Street seems to say, please come here and take your coffee and leave. Don't look like they're trying to build a warm, hospitable, large place for you to hang out with your friends for 3 hours. This place is, you're going to get an espresso. It's going to be delicious, cheaper than Starbucks. See ya tomorrow. And they can rent smaller places, have higher turnover, and compete with Starbucks without any of the costs that Starbucks has. That seems like an interesting game to play. The challenge you have is most people think they care about coffee quality, but past a certain level, they can't tell the difference. And that means that Blank has to create enough momentum that people get hooked on the process of buying coffee from them, because in a blind taste test, they probably cannot taste the difference.
And is that where the time element comes into this? Is it the literal time with the consumer? Is that where you're going with that?
No, that's not what I mean by time. Time.
Okay, what do you mean by time?
Like the forest idea is this: the first month of Nespresso's P&L was terrible.
Sure.
Right? It took 5-10 years. When I was at Yahoo, Yahoo had the chance to buy Google for $10 million, the whole company, because it wasn't worth anything for the first year. They had zero revenue. They were planting seeds. So what are you doing today that you will be really glad a year from now that you did? And so, if we think about peanut butter, which in my country is mostly a commodity, what would you have to invest today so that 3 years from now, it's paying off 100 times, right? And that's not an easy question to answer. If it was, the people at Nestle's would have already figured it out. But the food business tends to have moments of inspiration followed by long stretches of commodity. And I promise, if you're a small food entrepreneur and you get into the commodity mindset, you will lose.
By commodity mindset, unpack that a little bit more.
A commodity means that you can buy this if you want this, but there's one over there that's just like it. You only make a commodity if you think you're making a commodity.
Do you think there's a commodification of strategy and storytelling in that almost a founder is looking in the same field as every other tree that's being planted and thinking, I want to be a bit like that? And that's where you're kind of trying to choose the same customer. Does that make sense? You're trying to say... A
little bit. I guess what I'm getting at is this. If someone offered me cell phone service like I have now for half the price, I would switch instantly. AT&T has no brand. Verizon has no brand, et cetera, et cetera. They're all the same. Just give me the cheapest one. And anytime I have 4 hours just to waste, I could go buy a cheaper cell phone alternative, right? What I'm talking about is some customers will cross the street for a better jar of peanut butter. Most of them will not, but some will. What makes it better? That is the key question, right? Because it's probably not in a blind taste test. The Journal of Wine Economists has shown that sommeliers and other people who are fancy prefer $100 wine over $10 wine, unless it's a blind taste test, in which case they prefer $10 wine over $100 wine. So what are you buying when you buy a $100 bottle of wine? You're buying the story of a $100 bottle of wine, not what it tastes like. So the challenge you got to hear is you need to build a story that people who want a story will pay for.
I love the Bruce Lee quote, be like water. And I try to embody that, where you just kind of move with things. But in your illustrious career in marketing, like, I'd love to know what's been the biggest unforeseen change, like cataclysmic change, and how did you adapt like water to that?
So let's talk about what I mean by the current. I can see out my window the Hudson River. The Hudson River is a tidal estuary, means 12 hours it goes one direction, 12 hours it goes the other. And
how does that work?
It's a fjord. It goes with the tide.
Okay. Sure.
But when you look at it from a distance, it looks like a lake. There are no waves on it. The difference between a lake and a river is there's a current. On a lake, it doesn't matter which way you go because the water's just sitting there. But if there's a current, it's totally different to paddle your canoe upstream than downstream. So what makes someone a good surfer is they pick good waves. That's it. That's the key, picking good waves. So in my career, I have been buffeted by my unwillingness to see waves when I should see them. The most expensive moment was when I wrote one of the first 5 books about the internet. In that moment, I had enough resources and skill. I could have built Yahoo. But instead of building a search engine, I wrote a book about the internet. And the book ended up selling, 12,000 copies or something. And Yahoo went off to be worth $80 billion. So I have this t-shirt that I sit right over there to remind me that doing what I think I'm supposed to do is not my job. My job is to see what is going to happen next. Where is the current flowing? And it's very easy to dismiss things that are happening and saying that's not real, like AI. But it's also easy to get caught up and say NFTs when they're junk, right? So it's not easy to tell where the current is flowing, but it flows. And if we can see it and dance with it, the wind is at our back, as opposed to fighting to insist to the world that we are right. It's very easy as a food entrepreneur to think that there is a deliciousness shortage. There is not. I would like to encourage you to make something delicious. Thank you very much. But there is not a deliciousness shortage. That is not why people are going to buy from you. They're going to buy from you because of the 2 things that are never changing about humans: a need for status, a need for affiliation, and the third one, a bonus, freedom from the feeling of fear. Those are the 3 things that motivate people. Status means I get to eat lunch first. I'm a fancy person. I'm an insider. I've earned this. Affiliation is the people to my left and the people to my right are doing this. I don't want to be left out. And the freedom from the story of fear is I don't want to die. Those 3 things over and over and over and over and over again. And so if you decide to show up as a food entrepreneur, you better have a story bigger than this is delicious, because I can't name a food entrepreneur who has succeeded solely because it's delicious. And the last thing about Heinz ketchup, Malcolm Gladwell has pointed out, Heinz ketchup is in more refrigerators in the United States than any other food except for Kraft Singles cheese, which isn't really cheese. And the reason no one buys any other brand is simple. When you are 3 years old, Heinz ketchup is the very first food your mother lets you dispense yourself. And so to buy any other brand of ketchup is to denigrate your mom. It is a celebration of your childhood to embrace Heinz ketchup. That is what they make money from, not the fact that it's delicious.
What would you say the role of marketing is on human nature if you were to try and explain it to an alien?
Marketing is people like us do things like this. That's all it is. It is a cultural signal to people who want affiliation and status to say, this is what we do. So if you're looking at old issues in National Geographic and you see people from somewhere else wearing weird clothes, they're only weird to you. They're not weird to them. They grew up wearing those clothes because that's what the marketing told them to wear. Maybe not the store marketing, but it's still marketing, right? So if someone from 40 years ago saw us with this conversation with you little with invisible white things in your ear and me doing this thing, wearing these clothes. But what are we doing here? All of it was invented by marketing. This is normal now. So the goal, if you want scale, is to make what you're trying to shift from new to normal. Some people want to go when it's new. Some people want to go when it's normal. But this is how we get in sync as a species. The way ants get in sync is they release pheromones and the smells tell them what to do. Well, this is our version of that.
Talk to me about scaffolding. I loved that as an idea, and it kind of is just a beautiful way of describing things. One thing, so like your smallest viable audience, and like is I totally get that, and like you're going for this niche, and it's like give them the story to create the evangelists. How does the scaffolding and the story have to change as you move along that adoption curve? Like, how should brands think about that? Because ultimately, you have to go. There's a few people who love it now, but you have to change and go from mass market eventually. And I'd love to know how you do that without losing your brand's soul, because that sometimes happens as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think brands have a soul. I think people have a way they are in the world. And I think that we are here to serve other people. And if we can change what we do to serve other people better, then I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. So let me explain what we're talking about here. This is the product adoption life cycle. For people who are just listening, I'll describe it. It's a bell curve. And what we see is that at the beginning, the only people who buy what you sell are buying it because it's new. And over time, it spreads through the curve to people who buy it because it's popular. And then finally, people who buy it because everyone else has it. So if I think about, remember that AI pin that Humane came out with 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. They sold 100,000 the first day. I bought one because I buy things that are new. I don't buy them because they work. I don't buy them because they're proven. I buy them because they're new. When it comes to tech, when it comes to sneakers, I'm never buying anything new. I have 6 pairs of the same thing in my closet. So different people want different things. And so if we go and think about this curve, when you come out with a new thing, you say, hey, it's new. We have whole wheat hot cross buns, gluten-free or whatever it is. I don't know. The only people who buy it the first day are people who want it because it's new. And a lot of food entrepreneurs get in trouble because they think that if they just succeed when it's new, it's automatic that it's going to keep spreading because it's delicious. But when we look at the curve, here's an example of the curve with trucks. The Scout is an electric truck that went on sale in the US 3 months ago. They sold 50,000 of them the first day with a $500 deposit. People who put down the $500 deposit won the new truck. Then there's the worst truck ever made, the Cybertruck. We'll talk about that in a second. Then there's the Ford F-150 pickup truck, the most popular vehicle of all vehicles in the United States. And then there's a 1942 Dodge. Okay. It turns out the curve doesn't really look like this. The curve has a hole in it, a chasm, a hole between things that are popular because they're new and things that are popular because they work. And so when we think about the Cybertruck, the reason the Cybertruck is a failure is because after the people who bought it because it was new, got it, they stopped telling their friends about it because it's junk. So what scaffolding is how do you support the new people long enough and deep enough that they stick it out when it's hard to tell their friends? That scaffolding is the hard work the brand does to get from the early adopters who are looking for something fresh and new to the masses who don't care as much as those people. And over time, you probably are giving up some of, quote, your soul, right? That if you want your rock group to have a top 40 hit, you can't keep making edgy, speed metal, reggae music that only a few people want to hear. That once you give the fans who are like the new thing something, then you start broadening it because you've got to have something that works for the masses. So some food brands should consistently ignore the masses. They should say, it's not for you, right? That a magnificent vineyard should not come out with a low-priced wine for the masses. That will hurt them. They should say, no, this is just for people who understand the difference between a 1969 and a 1970, we're way over here. And it's surprising, but true, how many food brands have figured out that you don't need a huge audience to make something great and a brand that stands for something. And that's the opportunity.
Yeah, I love the idea of that chasm or chasm, however you say it, and I think, what do most people get wrong about that bit? I know you talked about like really supporting those people to share the story. Like, why doesn't the story share? Like, if someone really likes it. So I'm just trying to think, for example, like, how did Tony's Chocolonely cross that chasm? I think that's a good example because
it's a great example.
Yeah,
it was the one I was about to tell.
Okay, great.
Okay, so none of my books have crossed the chasm. Not one. I have 21 bestsellers, and yet I've never reached more than 1% of any population. On the other hand, Harry Potter crossed the chasm. Harry Potter crossed the chasm because there weren't that many, 10,000 nerdy kids fell in love with Harry Potter. But she was lucky enough that local bookstores found that it was an easy book to sell to kids who didn't know about it. That was the scaffolding. If you could get booksellers to feel like their life would get better if they promoted it, they would promote it. And that got it across the chasm to be the book everyone was reading, not the book some nerds were reading. So what did Tony do? So my friend Sean Eskenazi has a chocolate company, one of the first bean-to-bar companies in the US, very opposed to slave labor, doing really important work. Tony sells way more chocolate than Sean does. Tony backs into the chocolate business, doesn't want to be in the chocolate business, and he now sells 25% of all the chocolate in the Netherlands. How? Because he kept making big, cheap bars. He kept making assortment bars. He didn't get precious about it. He got distribution in every store he could find. He kept it cartoonish. He basically said, this isn't a super luxury brand, and you don't have to feel stupid to buy it. He just said, this is the kind of chocolate people like us buy. It's cheap. You can give it out for Halloween, and it's delicious. Notice that nowhere in most of the Tony Chocolonely promotion does he go on and on about slave labor, because that's not why he wants you to buy the chocolate. He wants you to buy the chocolate because your status in the circle you're in the Netherlands will go up if you show up with this instead of some lousy Nestle's bar. Plus,
so that's the story changing then. So the early adopters, it was the slavery piece. As it gets bigger, it is ultimately thick, delicious chocolate.
Yep. And the fact that it's thick is a key piece of this, because someone who doesn't care can tell as soon as they touch it, this is not a Nestle bar. It's twice as thick. It's luxurious. It's probably delicious. That's a story, and he stuck with it, and he stuck with it. And now in the US, in just in the last 2 years, his shelf space keeps growing. You can buy a big bag of Tony Chocolonely pieces for like $5, which is great.
And so one thing, just to latch onto that Tony's example, which I kind of understood but didn't definitely understood, is the catch-22 of leverage systems. So it's systems, games, and feedback loops dancing together. Right. How could we use Tony's to explore that, like as an example, or as another example?
Okay, so the retailer in the Netherlands has a problem, which is their chocolate shelf doesn't sell as much per square foot as they would like. If you go to a merchant and say, I can increase your inventory turns and your profit per square foot, the merchant will always listen to you, right? And Tony didn't have the leverage to do that at the A&P or a big supermarket chain in the US, but in the Netherlands he did, because he could show up and say, I got all this media attention, I'm local, and I'm willing to sell at a really small margin so that you can make money. And because I'm going to add energy to your shelf, your sales per square foot are going to go up. That becomes a feedback loop, because when he gets a little bit of shelf space, if he makes them a little bit more money, they give him more shelf space, and then he makes them more money. And now the energy on the shelf is going up, and the other chocolate seems boring in comparison, and he's the normal kind. So now the sales go up again because he's the normal kind. And so he worked the loop again and again and again by making the merchant happy and by giving the customer something that they wanted.
And that's the strategy, like strengthening? Is that part of that? Is that the same part of the
Yes,
equation.
because the more he does it, the better it works.
Mm.
And so what you're seeking to do as a food entrepreneur is first you got to figure out which system are you playing in. Are you direct to consumer or are you playing with merchants? Right? So, what's the strategy of By the Way Bakery? We've talked about it before, my wife's bakery. Everything she sells is gluten-free, dairy-free, and kosher. So by doing that, she already puts herself in a new category. She doesn't have any competition. She just has to get people into her category. And so the pitch is, don't just buy one or two for the kid with celiac at the party. Buy it for everybody because no one will be able to tell it's not delicious. That's why it's called By the Way. By the way, it's gluten-free. So now you don't have to isolate a kid. There's always room at the table for everybody because we've got stuff for everybody here because we've focused on the people who can't eat the other stuff. And now your status goes up as a mom or a dad because you're the parent who brings something out that all the kids can be delighted with.
Mm.
And that gets you to go back to the store and then you can get hooked on the cycle. That approach to the market is harder at retail because Whole Foods says, we don't care about one family. We have this piece of shelf space. We need sales per square foot to go up. You're not going to get shelf space unless you give us a story that we can use to start the cycle going again. So her wholesale division has a different challenge. How do you create that iterative feedback loop so that people who buy it come back and buy it some more so you get more shelf space so it can be repeated? And in the US, traditionally, the way a big company does that is you buy a ton of ads. Because if you buy a ton of ads, people go to the store and ask for it, so you get more shelf space and it pays for the ad.
Principles remain, but practices change.
Yes.
Fundamental principles do not change. I mean, if you want to look at humankind, I mean, people, you can take let's call it 250,000 years. We've evolved, we've developed. And just because we've invented digital media in the last 25 years, humankind has not fundamentally changed. It is exactly the same. We've got wealthier, we've got more of that, we've got more things, we've got that. So those fundamentals don't change, but technology tries to convince you it has, because it wants you to prefer that bit of technology versus that bit of technology, whatever it might be. So you have this sense of it's all different, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen F, Gen Z, it's all bullshit. It is total bullshit, invented by research marketing companies trying to make clients feel insecure. And if you go into the background of those people, so what are their beliefs? You look at them and you go, you've just described an 18-year-old or whatever, and that's what I was like when I was 18. Or somebody said to me the other day, they said to me, oh, young people don't watch television anymore. I went, no, I didn't when I was 18. I didn't watch television. I was out. I was trying to meet as many women as I could possibly meet. I wasn't sitting in front of the television next to mum and dad. That's what they were doing. I wasn't. So this idea that it's all fundamentally, of course, certain things have influences. The use of the mobile phone has influences. Technology has an influence on us. But we haven't fundamentally changed. And it's important to understand that. There are three things we've been obsessed about since the beginning of time. And that is access, speed, the future. All right? We've wanted to access more because that made us more secure. I could get more food.
Yeah.
Get that. Speed, I want to get there faster. So we got on a horse, as opposed to, we started out walking, crawling, then we walked, then we ran. Then somebody said, get on a horse, you go even faster. We went from an axe to a bow and arrow. That went even faster, from spear to a bow and arrow. And then the future. We've been always obsessed about the future. What's going to happen tomorrow? Am I going to be able to feed myself? Our ancestors could track an animal. They could look at a print and go, oh, that animal passed here at about 2 hours ago, so I could track it and catch it. All right. If it's like, oh no, that was 3 days ago, gone. So we've been obsessed with those three things since the beginning of time. We haven't fundamentally changed. Now, technology around us changes. We still want stuff faster. We want more. We want access to more. And we want to kind of understand the future.
How do you think brands play a role in like evolution?
Well, when you say evolution, what do you mean by evolution?
As in our desire to that idea is to constantly improve.
Well, yeah, they make it easier for you.
Yeah.
So I have a mobile phone. I'm connected.
Yeah.
I can connect to you faster, and I can connect to more people. So it does two things: speed and access.
Speed. And
It can't predict the future. We're still obsessed with that. People trying to tell us they can predict the future. I remember somebody going, this was about 6 years ago now, there was a whole thing where with Google had done some algorithms and they'd worked out that, that we were going to suffer from flu or something because people were buying more cough sweets and well, look, I can predict the future. And I remember the senior marketing director of a very, very large, famous organization telling me and saying, John, it's amazing. We can now predict the future. And I'm working with Google on this and we're going to look at the algorithms. And apart from the fact that I thought he was fucking stupid, yeah. I saw, he really had drunk the Kool-Aid. And obviously Google had done a very good job at selling him. And I said, so you can predict the weather? And he went, what do you mean? And I said, well, obviously the weather drives all kinds of purchasing decisions. If it's raining, I buy an umbrella.
Yeah.
If it's sunny, I buy an ice cream. And we but he kind of believed that they'd done it. But that's the one thing that always frustrates us. There's a lovely phrase which says there are no facts on the future, and we have people who are constantly all the time prediction. I predict this. I predict that.
And I suppose ultimately the reason we want that prediction is a form of safety, survival.
Safety.
So,
Oh yeah. Of course. There's a famous campaign we did for Levi's, which was called Flat Eric, and the brief was that we'd had these wonderfully kind of macho heroes, and there was a feeling that maybe we've pushed that as far as we should push it. Maybe we should try something else. And we talked about relationships. Maybe, now we should project relationship rather than the single heroic figure. We sort of, used Brad Pitt before he became famous. So we had people like that. Anyway, and so the brief came in for that. And I thought it was quite interesting. Okay, how do I do this? And I thought the danger is it'll just be, a relationship thing, a kind of, they're famous relationships where two people buddy movies they talked about and that. And I thought, well, you've got to stand out in advertising. You've got to be something that, I haven't seen that before. And so we were developing the idea and we weren't getting very far. And a wonderful producer at BBH called Philippa Crane had shown me this director who had a fluffy puppet and a character he had a relationship with. And I thought to myself, now that could be a great relationship, couldn't it? That could be a great way of presenting a relationship. It's a guy and he's a fluffy puppet, but they have they're on the road. And so I said, right. So I got the team to write a script like Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And Neil Cassidy and it was Kerouac, And so I presented the idea to the team, to Levi's, and I said, I've got it for you. It's basically Jack Kerouac on the road, Neil Cassidy, they're out there, it's about that and about the clothes they wear. And of course, they wore Levi's and stuff like that. And the client's going, this is great, love it, love it, love it. Typical in a way, because they're kind of going, yeah, we feel comfortable with this. Great ideas often make people feel uncomfortable. That's why they're difficult to sell. So I was selling it to them and they were going, yeah, we can see it on the road, Jack Kerouac, yeah. And they went, great, love it, John. I said, look, there's just one thing I haven't told you. What's that? And I said, one of the characters is a fluffy yellow puppet called Flat Eric. And that's the relationship. This guy, cool dude, and a fluffy yellow puppet. And they did think I had gone mad. And they thought, you must be mad. A lot of people in the agency thought I'd gone mad. Are you sure about this, John? You sure this is going to work? And of course, you have to say, of course it's going to work. Deep inside, you're going, fuck knows if it is going to work, because it's really pushing the envelope here. Anyway, so it went back that second time. They went, no, John, we really, fluffy yellow puppet. No, I don't think it. And so the third time I decided, right, I can't go back and just do it again. So what I did was, part of it, I wanted for them to take the back cover of things like Vogue. And I said, so I decided what I would do is I'd go back and to kind of get the idea of life and make them feel like this could be great, is I took back covers of Vogue and I just, instead of it being some handsome Giorgio Armani model or whatever it might have been, looking cool and groovy, I just put Flat Eric and just Levi's, And I said, and that's what I want you to do. Not only TV, buy all the back covers of these style magazines and put them. And they suddenly looked at it and they went, oh, yeah, I kind of get that. I'm still unsure, but I kind of see where you're coming from. And in the end, they were great and they bought it. And it then became hugely.
They were great. It's very interesting because that's an operative word there. It takes two to tango.
Well, it does.
It takes bravery from both sides.
They did trust us. They did trust that we had their best interests at heart, that we were trying to do something that would stand out, that would be distinctive, and that would capture people's imagination. And it did. It became quite famous. I am completely confused about why people believe in religion and why they think, I'm often told when people say, "Oh, I'm a religious person and faith is very important to me." I go, "Yeah, fine." But I kind of go, "Well, why do you believe in a book?" When they talk about the Bible, that's so full of the most appalling things in the world. Why should I hold that up as a means of a way of living my life? I don't understand it. And they say, "Well, what do you believe in?" And I say, I believe in the creative being, the ability to create and make beautiful things. And that's why I admire William Shakespeare. He didn't write once about religion. He wrote about the human condition. Why you read Milton, or why, Wordsworth, or the great poets, or those are the people that I think we should follow, not some inane book that tells me, my God's better than your God. And I think but most of my friends are not religious. So I'm answering I'm not really.
No,
answering
it's
your
interesting.
fairly.
I think just what I've got to. I think one of the best things you've ever. I think I listened to a talk you did in Paris where you talked about like the best brand is the Catholic.
Oh
Church.
yeah, brilliant.
You
brand.
could just quickly go through that and then we'll wrap this up because it's just
phenomenal. Well,
it's just like I think it's your masterpiece.
Yeah, it's
so
wonderful. I do love irreverence. It's one of my things.
Yeah.
And I was in New York where I was on a panel, and because I lived there for 2.5 years setting BBH up, and I was in, I think it was somewhere in, might have been Denver or Colorado. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was on this advertising panel, and a question from the audience came up. So, what's the world's greatest brand? And I was lucky. I was the last one to go. There were about 4 people in front of me, and they came up with Coca-Cola and talked about the brilliance of it. Somebody talked about BMW. Somebody talked about Nike back then, and Apple was being talked about. And they said, "So, John, what about you?" And I said, "No, I think they're all great brands. For me, they're not the greatest brand. The greatest brand in the world is the Catholic Church."
So good.
And of course, you're in America. There's a sort of slight, "Ooh, steady, John, steady," And anyway, I didn't care. I was in. I said, "So think about it. World's greatest logo, brilliant sign of the cross, absolutely fantastic. It could have been, it could have been a carpenter's plane. Jesus was a carpenter. Could have been a fish because the fishermen, the apostles and all of that. But no, they went for the cross. And then the genius is they nailed the founder to the cross. What a brilliant idea. Then they put him on the top of every building, logo up there. Fundamentally, they went straight away they went global straight away. None of this kind of, when do we go global? 7-day opening. What do you mean you close? You don't do that. Diversified, christenings, weddings, funerals. They moved it on, get you in. And of course, location. Biggest building in the center of the town, the village, wherever it was. That was it, understood that. And worked with the greatest artists, worked with the greatest painters, to propagate the church, had to go there once a week, just to reaffirm your faith, just like people go to an Apple store today. I worship at the temple called Apple. Catholic Church was there before. Through the line thinking. Church was built on the sign of the cross, east-west, the sunrises, and just absolute genius, the greatest brand ever. And saw a bit of competition, the Puritans came along and Seventh-day Adventists and whoever they might be, they all came, like that. Every brand has a bit of competition, Nike had a few competition, nothing like the Catholic Church. 2,000 years old, still going strong. And what were they selling? Faith. A very modern brand, because so often we're buying things today that you can't see. I can't see my bank anymore. I have to believe it's there. I use, I'm on Vodafone, it's vibrating air. I can't see Vodafone. I can't see Google. I can't see Facebook. I don't know, building, it's none of that. Very modern brand. They were selling faith, belief. Brilliant, brilliant. Greatest brand ever. And all the lessons are there.
If you're a challenger brand that's absolutely killing it in D2C, but you're struggling to crack retail, then you've got to listen to this. Maybe you've got an Ocado listing, maybe you've got a Whole Foods listing, maybe you're absolutely killing it in Selfridges, maybe you're absolutely killing it in your farm shop and your indies. But my friends, making the leap, crossing El Chasm, crossing El Rubicon to grocery retail is not easy. It's the Champions League of FMCG. It's super hard. It means playing at a higher level, and that's where so many amazing brands sadly stumble. Look, retailers want stories backed by data, not dreams, and a pretty pitch deck. And let's be real, supermarkets are not just going to magically make a space for you and your little brand. They need data. Something's got to go for you to get in, for you to get on shelf. And that is why I've got to tell you about North Star. They are the team that's helping purpose-led FMCG brands go from gut instinct dreams to unstoppable pitch decks that actually unlock retailers. North Star are not like another data company that force feeds you data like foie gras, that act like a NASA space mission. It's super, super simple to use. Their team are amazing and they actually get the challenger mindset. North Star are your shortcut to smarter decisions, stronger pitches, and investor confidence, all built specifically for challenger brands like yours. You don't need a massive sales team, you need North Star. Link in the show notes, click that link and you'll be able to book a free demo with North Star. Highly, highly recommend that, and thank me later.
There's a Japanese concept called Kano theory by a guy who's at the University of Tokyo, who argued he did a lot of work in the Japanese consumer electronics field back in the day. And he argued that products, and you could apply this to services as well, had three attributes. And they're very different, okay? There's table stakes. You have to not fail at anything markedly, okay? So that would be if you bought milk repeatedly, and every time you bought this brand of milk, the carton leaked, right? You wouldn't buy it again. Doesn't matter anything else you've done, it's a waste of time because the carton leaks, okay?
Yep.
And that's what's called, I think, sort of you could call it table stakes or basic attributes. They're what's required to be in the category in the first place. Then there are performance attributes, which are how good are you at doing the thing that the thing is intended to do, how good the milk is within the thing, whether people can tell that it's good milk, whether it has reasonable shelf life, all those things. And generally, there's a linear return on improvement there. And then there's this third component of things, which would be delight attributes, where they're things you weren't even expecting, and as a consequence of not expecting them, you really notice them, and they create a kind of emotional effect which is out of all proportion to their cost. But they're often quite tangential to the main function of the product. So the example I always give is if you're in consumer electronics, you have a cassette player. And obviously it has to play cassettes, and it has to work, and it mustn't mangle the tapes, and it mustn't catch fire, and it mustn't do any of those terrible things which would basically be you exit the gene pool at that point. Okay. And then you have the performance attributes of the cassette deck, are things like battery life and sound quality and, wattage through the speakers before they start distorting. Those are the basic performance attributes. And then the delight attribute in a cassette deck was the eject mechanism. So if you won't remember cassettes, but you remember DVDs, do you?
Oh, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's when you pull
Which is
it
you
back.
press eject and it has like a counterbalance damping mechanism and it hisses in a beautiful hydraulic way. You go, ooh, that's lovely. I'd really like that. Nice action, as Alan Partridge once said. On the other hand, if you press eject, it just goes clack. Functionally, there's no difference between the two, okay? There's no reason to spend money on the eject mechanism, but precisely because you can make it lovely and people aren't expecting it, that's where you should spend your money. Now, Will Gadara's point was, I think, about the spoons he chose for the ice cream in the central courtyard of a museum. He found these Italian spoons. Everybody went crazy because they were plastic, but they were particularly lovely, and they cost a fortune. Everyone was saying, do we need to spend X cents per spoon? But as he pointed out, he said, when everybody finished, they couldn't help going on about the spoons. That was the thing they noticed, because it was an area of disproportionate. That's why it's called hospitality beyond reason.
Yes.
There's a certain amount to it, which is service, which you can codify and reduce to an algorithm. And then there's the thing that you weren't expecting.
But why I love restaurants.
And in McDonald's, by the way, that probably isn't anything to do with food. It's like handing the kids balloons, right? Or it's the toy and a Happy Meal, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I actually think for my own personal, I when I'm drunk and I go to the service, I always go to the one in the Wandsworth roundabout. For that expectation.
That's bizarre. That Wandsworth roundabout, it's like a little bit of Los Angeles has just descended on London.
I don't understand.
Completely bizarre thing.
Why you know, the arches are like totemic. They're like up like that. It is kind of like that cathedral of consumption.
It is, yeah.
I'm like, I mean, when I'm fucked, I'm like looking at it going, oh my God, it's like, I feel like I'm getting pulled into the mothership of gluttony.
Because you live in Surrey, do you? So you
So
drive out of London that way.
I used to live in Fulham.
I used to live in Fulham.
Yeah,
okay,
and then all my mates live in sort of Battersea. So I'm always round that part of London. So it's like the perfect place to go. But what I love, the surprise and delight, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, when the chips are in the bag and it feels like there's an overflow of chips. Yeah. I don't know. Five Guys is the extreme example.
The extra scoop.
Yeah, it's the extra scoop. But that does something to you. And also, like, I think the surprise and delight is the wonderful selection of sauces you can get. I think McDonald's sauces are the best. The barbecue, the ketchup,
well, of course,
the curry sauce is fantastic.
The KFC now does it with the extra hot one, doesn't it? So you've got a choice of those when you have chicken dips.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got an extreme one, and they've got barbecue, and you typically get some sort of sweet chili thing, don't you?
Yeah.
But those things are exactly that. It's that you know, and actually, you can have a meal that's ruined because they forget to put the sauces in the bag.
Oh, well, I've had that numerous times.
It's rather like the most failed attempt to create a low budget own brand version of a product was, I think, Sainsbury's in the 1980s produced their own version of the pot noodle, okay, which was called something like Noodle Pot or whatever it was, you know, and it was the same packaging, but there was no sachet. And you just opened the lid of this thing and it was just like you'd been cheated. You know, you felt completely bereft.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of the pot noodle is that weird flavor sachet that you put on the top, because that creates the yin and the yang of the whole thing.
It's the alchemy.
I never thought I'd be talking about the Buddhist union of opposites in a pot noodle, but that's the alchemy of the thing. If the pot noodle had never had that sachet, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. The sachet of the pot noodle is their kind of version of hospitality.
But the other reason I love food is like there's basically every single touch point. There's a unique story to tell.
Yeah.
Like I think the thing I've listened is how Guinness turned their bug into a feature. The fact it takes ages to serve, and is actually a bit of a
bar staff don't like serving Guinness,
but the fact it takes longer psychologically, that is the way you say it turns
into a reward, turn into anticipation, to reframe
Have you been to Devonshire yet? Have you heard of the Devonshire?
Oh, don't. Everybody yesterday was talking about the Devonshire, which supposedly does the best Guinness in London. And of course, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you sell a lot of Guinness, it's really, really fresh. All this stuff about weird taste you've never had it until you've had it in Dublin is kind of contextual bollocks. But that's my argument, which is why I said you can open a fish restaurant by the sea, is because fish tastes better when you're by the sea. Rosé wine tastes better when you're by the sea. Don't ask me why. But there are a lot of foods which require context to be fully enjoyable.
Oh, it's like food you have on holiday and you bring it back. It's just fucking
No,
rank.
this is a famous example of someone who was in the Caribbean and bought the rights to a banana liqueur, which while they were in the Caribbean tasted, and Pernod outside France tastes like shit.
Yeah.
Okay, Ricard Pernod. You drink them outside a French cafe. It's fantastic. You go buy a litre bottle to take it home. You won't drink it for 5 years. And the same thing happened with this person who bought the rights to this banana liqueur. They took it back and invited their friends round to South London with great fanfare, saying, "You won't believe it, I bought the rights to this drink. I think it's the most magical thing." And they all basically sipped it and said, "This is disgusting."
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work in London.
Yes.
You see? And and when I say that when you're by the sea, it would make sense if this were an evolutionary adaptation, though it might not be. Okay, so I asked the question, this is the question I always had as a mock question for business school students. Why are there more fish restaurants by the sea? And what you might call the black and white answer is, low cost of distribution, access to raw materials, etc. But quite a lot of that stuff's probably gone all the way to Billingsgate and come all the way back again, right?
Yeah.
It's not really anything like, we've got really wonderful supplies of fish necessarily. It's simply that when you're by the sea, you feel fish and chips by the sea just tastes a lot better than fish and chips in an inland park.
Yeah,
and that's just how it is.
It's like imagine having a Guinness in a Costa coffee cup. It's just the same, same
thing.
Yeah, same thing.
I mean, it's interesting they've put a lot of attention into designing that pint glass, isn't it? The Guinness pint glass.
Well, and also have you seen that? Which I don't know if is a load of absolute bollocks.
Oh, no, the ultrasonic pour with the Guinness nitro surge.
What's your take on that?
Oh, have I seen it? I've owned one. I bought one for my daughter, who's 22. My proudest achievement as a parent, nothing to do with their educational attainment, is the fact that both my daughters drink beer. And they're really into beer, because I'm not spending the rest of my life buying the little fuckers rosé.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And so I'm really proud of that. And one of my daughters actually is a major Guinness drinker. Absolutely loves it.
Yeah, it's the best.
And I'm so proud of that. But I actually bought her a nitro surge for Christmas.
But did you but what? So that I haven't actually.
First of all, it makes pouring a joy, and someone's reviewed it and said it's as good as a bad pub pint. Now, actually, that's not bad, actually, at home. I think that's a bit unkind. I think it's better than that, because it does recreate the whole tactile experience to within a fairly high degree of fidelity, I think. The Nitro Surge, I'm a big fan.
Why do you think, so Guinness have now become the most selling pint, I think it was last year.
Well, the other big
what
success.
happened that? Why did Guinness, it's been around for years.
Maybe, they've always wrestled with an interesting problem, which is it's actually the least calorific beer. And yet, because of its dense nature, everybody assumes it's the most calorific beer.
Yes.
So it may be in part that message has got through. But you've also got the zero alcohol Guinness, which is really, really interesting.
That's delicious.
Now, here's a good tip. The can of Guinness zero alcohol, okay, is slightly less than a pint. If you go to the Royal Cinque Ports Golf Club, or Cinque Ports, no one knows how to pronounce it, in Deal, and you ask for a pint of non-alcoholic Guinness, because golf, if you think about it, golf courses, most people drive to a golf club, so there's a limit to how much you can drink if you don't want to wrap your car around a tree. And so they sell quite a lot of the zero alcohol Guinness. And then what they do is they pour the whole pint of zero alcohol Guinness, and they say, "Do you want me to top that up from the tap so you get the full head?" And I actually told Guinness about this, because I said that's a really important behaviour, because first of all, the zero alcohol Guinness is a very, very good approximation of the taste of a Guinness. What it is about zero alcohol beer that it's finally got good in the last few years, absolutely fascinating. There are processes like what's 2 + 2? He always gave this example. You don't have to think about it, you just go 4. Whereas 13 times 12, which I think is 156.
I'm
okay?
fine.
But okay, you actually have to give that a little bit of thought.
Yep.
Okay. So an example of something that's very system one would be nearly everything you do while you're driving. The vast majority of what you do while you're driving a car is basically instinctively driven. You're not consciously thinking there is a right turn ahead, therefore I will need to turn the steering wheel shortly. You fundamentally trained your brain to make driving, for the most part, autonomic. Now, you might argue driving in a city like London, why people hate all those 20-mile-an-hour limits, okay, is that a process that was once basically autonomic, and you could basically go, I'm in a city now, I better not go too fast, and 30 miles an hour seemed about right, okay, suddenly now you're having to pay attention consciously to a load of things which once you could actually take for granted. Okay, so, and the most extreme sort of system one form of driving is that weird feeling where you suddenly realize you have no memory of driving for the last 10 minutes. You've been lost in a kind of dream world, and meanwhile your body and eyes have been driving the car, and you assume you haven't actually hit anyone or anything, okay, because that would have actually snapped you back into attention, I hope, okay? But we've all had those moments, okay? If you're a frequent driver, if you're an infrequent driver, when you first get into a car, when you're first learning to drive, when you're first learning to ride a bicycle, it's system 2, and through repetition and a kind of automation, it gets effectively, transferred to, metaphorically, system 1. And an awful lot of the activities of system 1 occur effectively, they're opaque to introspection. They occur below the level of consciousness. The point being that a large part of our activity, and people always quote weird figures like 95% of our decisions are unconscious. I'm not sure you can realistically put a percentage on that, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assert that a very large proportion of decisions we make are either unconscious or under the influence of unconscious processes. The argument that Kahneman made is that, of course, the system 1 is faster than system 2, and we're not even aware of it in operation. And as a consequence of which, although it's unbelievably valuable and probably essential to our evolutionary survival, Kahneman would argue that sometimes system 1 gets a jump on system 2 and causes us to make a suboptimal decision before we've had time to think about it.
Okay.
So now, by the way, there are lots and lots of cases where making a decision before you've had time to think about it probably saved your life. Yeah. Okay, jumping out of the way of a bus because you're standing on the road, you hear a noise, and without actually pausing to think about the consequences of your action, you simply jump to safety. Those kind of behaviors are actually very, very necessary in evolutionary terms to our survival. Kahneman might have argued that in a modern environment where more and more decisions maybe require system 2 thinking, in other words, we actually need to discipline our thought and decision-making processes, that the what you might call the path dependency of decision-making, where system 1 gets to make a decision first, may lead to things which are biases or even very bad decisions, okay, simply because effectively our instinctive, heuristically driven, okay, assumptions override what might be the consequence of a more thoughtful interpretation or evaluation of all the evidence. So, one very system 1 thing, by the way, I think, is the idea that you get what you pay for. Okay, so the idea when you're in a shop and you're going to Chipotle, and if one thing's more expensive than the other, you'll probably assume it's better. Now, there's no actual evidence for that, okay? I always give this example, which is that if you went to a shop to buy a Bluetooth speaker, and one Bluetooth speaker was bigger than the other, more powerful than the other, and it had more features, but it was also cheaper. Now, to a standard economist, that's the easiest decision in the world. Higher utility, lower price, slam dunk, nothing to see here, no-brainer, buy the cheaper, better speaker, inverted commas, move on. But humans, that would conflict with a human instinct, which is something that's more expensive is probably better in some way. And actually, we find that decision deeply confusing in reality. We go, that's strange, because if I'd actually made a better speaker, this is sort of social intelligence, I'd probably charge more for it. So the fact that this speaker is better and cheaper is now confusing me, and I'm probably not going to buy either of them. So there are a lot of cases where our brain, whether we like it or not, is operating under certain mental assumptions, which kind of almost in hardware, if you like,
Yeah. So what's happening when I go into Chipotle then? Like, because what in terms of that decision with the Bluetooth speaker, right?
Yeah.
If I go into Chipotle and I order, say, the chicken with extra chorizo and cheese and guacamole up front, and they say it's 14 quid, right? Suddenly I'm a bit like, oh, I don't want to do that, right? I'd love to eat it. But then if they get me in with the chicken, right? And then they start fucking loading it up. And then as they move the bastard along and they say, right, I want you extra treat, so 1 quid. Why am I saying yes to that? Why am I saying yes?
It's a sort of sunk cost thing, which is
What's going on there?
quite often for these inverted commas biases.
Yeah.
There's actually a phrase that sums it up, which is kind of in for a penny, in for a pound. Okay.
Yeah.
And the point would be, why spoil the ship for a ha'porth of tar? I'm in here anyway now. I might as well go the whole hog and get the absolute sandwich I want.
Yes.
So in other words, I mean, if you think about it, the whole concept of sides, is very similar to that, which is, you could argue that sides just give people more choice. Yes, that's true. But there is the argument that I've got this main thing. Now, having committed and mentally written off the cost of X, I might as well spend a bit extra to make X even better.
That's the
So
time.
the classic example would be buying a car. Okay, you can't aftermarket fit something like a glass sunroof, or heated steering wheel or whatever. So when you're buying a car, you think, well, I'm spending a 5-figure sum already. I might as well spend another £3,000 or £4,000 on extras to make this as good as it possibly can be. And because after all, I'll never have another chance again for 4 years. And car makers will make inordinately more margin on optional extras than they will on the base model car.
Yeah. So what you're
other examples.
So once you're in that sunk, once you're sort of that sunk cost thing, or in for a penny, in for a pound. Do you think that's basically your sort of the system one's activated there, where you're just sort of thinking, fuck it, like I may as well get the roof, I may as well get the extra treat, so I mean, a classic example would be if you turn up at a hotel, and they say you can actually for £50 a night you can upgrade to a suite. Obviously, it depends how long you're staying there to a degree, but you are more likely to go, yeah, fuck it, okay, than you are to buy the suite when at the same time as you're paying for the basic room. And the argument for that is that you've already mentally written off the cost of the room because you've paid that in advance, okay? So I'm in for 200 quid for my 3-night stay or whatever it might be, or 2-night stay. I'm in for that amount of money. And now I can make this experience amazing for just a bit more. And undoubtedly, that is a recurring pattern with marketing pretty much everywhere, okay? I mean, once it's sometimes called in salesmanship the foot in the door thing. If you can get someone to agree to buy something, then either immediately or subsequently getting them to upgrade to a better version of that thing is often easier than selling the better version of that thing from the off. So, okay, a brand that mastered that fantastically, and which has given them a large shareholding by Warren Buffett and an extraordinary level of success, is American Express, where there were a lot of people who probably wouldn't get an American Express gold card off the bat. But if you sold them the green card and then 3 years later said, for only another X pounds a year, okay, their attention is focused on the increment, not on the overall cost. Okay, so your attention when it's do I want to add the chicken, do I want to add the so-and-so, is focused on the incremental cost, not the headline amount. If I served you an absolutely magnificent meal, but one of the prongs of your fork was out of alignment, you couldn't enjoy the meal.
Yeah.
End of.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I call a silent irritant.
Yeah, lovely.
Because it's not something that you're going to call the waiter over and go, excuse me, you're going to put up with it. But it still devalues your enjoyment. And what we try to do is to annihilate those silent irritants. So if you look in the restaurant, for example, all of the tables have 3 points on the floor. So 3 legs.
They will never wobble.
So they can't wobble. So that irritant of that happens to everybody.
So
when you go into a
Yes.
restaurant, then
That one has 4, actually.
yeah, well, this is okay. It doesn't wobble because it's on a carpet. So
Oh, sorry,
that's the trick.
Okay, fair enough.
Rory, what would you say the silent irritants are in like a completely different category?
They're very often, that's really interesting. One of the criticisms I'd make of marketing is it spends a lot of time trying to amplify the positives rather than remove the negatives.
Yeah.
And the negatives are interesting because they're often experienced and felt, but not really spoken. You don't really capture them in market research.
Yeah.
No one would say, I was going to have a meal, but the table was wobbly, so I didn't.
Or the light was too bright.
Oh, you've got it exactly.
Or I smelled something that I didn't know what it was.
By the way, in this category, one thing as a 59-year-old is menus you can't fucking read.
There's a perfect example.
When you see people with their mobile phone shining a torch onto the menu.
Even worse, menus you can't understand.
Yeah.
Words. Chefs are always putting words on there. I eat out every day, and I still find words that I don't know that I've got to look. Oh, fucking hell! It's lettuce.
Why is that a status?
Is
that a status thing? Do you reckon? A status thing of the chefs to sort of say like, I'm not better than you, but we're using ingredients. Why do people do that?
I'll give you a silent irritant. Okay, calls may be recorded for quality control purposes. Okay. Yeah. So particularly if you get cut off and you have to listen to the whole spiel all over again. What I'd like the government to do is literally to email everybody and just say, you now understand that all calls may be recorded for quality control purposes. Tick this box and accept it. And literally you will get 2 hours of your life back. Yeah. Okay. Unidentified object in the bagging area, by the way.
Oh, God.
Which also, because it's spoken out loud, this is a classic case. It's not just annoying, it's mildly humiliating. Because it's broadcasting to other people in the checkout, this fucker doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. Some things are really interesting in terms of silent irritants, which is something.
Can I give you a great one?
Go on. Yeah, please.
That you see everywhere. Is we take no responsibility for your stuff getting stolen.
Thank you.
That's so true.
Basically, fuck you. We're not going to look after your bag. And also, if it does get nicked, don't come to us about it. Because, by the way, it happens here all the time. So obviously not here, but that's what the sign actually says if you think about it.
Basically, do not enjoy your evening. Spend it in a state of mild anxiety. Okay. I mean,
clutching your bag.
There's a brilliant one which is... and by the way, I by and large venerate Marks and Spencer's. I think they're extremely good. Okay, but Marks and Spencer's in Sevenoaks, in the elevator, in the lift from the car park, says if you've got a problem, i.e., being fined in what is effectively their car park, don't come to us. I can't remember the exact word, but it says you must contact the car park operator directly or whatever. And I kind of go, look, actually, this is your problem. Okay, I won't go into the details about why people get fined unfairly, but it's all to do with number plate recognition and bullshit like that. But no, I mean, really weird silent irritants, which literally nobody knows about, is that a large part of the irritation and stress of being in a queue is the people behind you.
Yeah.
And it's the feeling that there are people behind you sort of watching you and judging you. So one of the things McDonald's discovered is they discovered that the longer the queue was, the more people sort of fucked up their order. And you go, well, if you've been waiting for 6 minutes in a queue, you should be word perfect by the time you get to the front of the queue. What it turns out, and I only discovered this by accident before I researched it. And the reason was I used to board the Eurostar at Ebbsfleet. And I noticed that if you went through security and you were the last person going through, it was a completely unstressful experience. Whereas the feeling that other people were going, that dickhead's forgotten to take his belt off or whatever it is, that was what made it stressful in part.
It's really interesting.
No one would consciously ever say that. What I hate about a queue is the people behind me.
No, because it's while it's in your mind.
It's in your mind. It's felt, not thought.
You don't want to elucidate, and therefore it's silent. It becomes silent. And we have to look out for these things all of the time.
I love your example of
like,
we do not take responsibility.
You know what you were saying earlier, Raw, about how a lot of people amplify the positives in marketing but don't think about the negatives.
Yeah.
So you say that basically Amazon, all they're doing, Amazon Prime is basically just removing the negatives.
Yeah.
Everything, all the silent
Amazon has been pretty astute at removing negatives. Yeah.
This is like the Amazon Primeification of pulling Guinness. Like it just fucking goes out like that. It's like that. The speed of service here is mad.
Well, I've always felt that
What's
people.
What's the art of that?
Well, there's two sides to it. One, it's really annoying when you're waiting at a bar and somebody is slowly pouring 1 pint at a time. When you know that they can pour 4, or that the beer can be sped up. But secondly, it's a commercial bit. You know, if you can't be good when you're busy, then you're less likely to ever be busy. Because when you're busy, it's the time that people are at the maximum point of enjoying what you're doing. So to be really good when you're busy is the absolute key. This thing where you go into like a stadium bar at halftime and you've got to wait 10 minutes to get a pint, which means you've only got 3 at the end before the game kicks off again. Why?
Yes.
Why can't they just have the beer ready? Why can't you prepare and pay for it? Why can't you there's ways of doing it. And we've worked out a way of doing it here that nobody ever waits. And
What is that system?
Do you produce beer in advance of it being
No,
on?
we don't. We never do. That's very important that we don't.
Well, say that again. Sorry,
Batch processing.
Yeah.
So you could pour a Guinness now in anticipation that someone's going to request.
No, that's one thing we don't.
Okay.
What we have done is put extra taps in. They're faster taps, and when somebody orders, it gets filled immediately. The money's taken by somebody else, and the next person is done. So we can do multiple orders at the same time rather than doing one at a time.
Here's a silent irritant, by the
Go
way. Coffee shops, which is, I know why they do it. They don't actually charge you until the end, okay? But as a result, while they're making their coffee, I'm standing around with my phone in my hand like a dickhead.
Yeah.
And actually, what I want to do is pay, scan the loyalty card, put my phone away, wait for the coffee.
Yeah.
But instead, because they have, and I'm sure there's a reason for the policy, because they have this policy of people don't like being charged until they've got their coffee. But I actually find, I think that's actually changed. I think with cash, it might have worked that way.
Yeah.
I think when you're paying by phone, something different happens.
I don't know whether it's an Irish
I'm
thing.
intrigued by the fact that someone else takes the money.
Yeah. Well, it just works easier because you got one person doing that one job, taking the money, making sure.
So it's Henry Ford. This is Henry Ford.
It is.
applied to-
It's a marginal gains always. when you
Fantastic.
do it.